everybody. It's great to be here. As I was listening to the story about explaining DevOps, it reminded me of this time I came to London to speak at an Agile conference. And I had landed in London. I had a friend who was in Paris, and I was like, oh, I'll just pop over there first, see them, and come back. And Border Patrol thought it was pretty sketchy. So I got back to London, and they started grilling me. And they're like, why are you here? And I'm like, I'm speaking at an Agile conference. And he goes, explain Agile to me. Like, all right, where do I even start over here? So I'm like, he's Wikipediaing it, and I'm like sitting there. He's like, okay, you're fine, just go. That was early days back in London. So I'm happy to be back here. And today we're going to be talking about product management. I asked, this is a DevOps conference. Why'd you invite a product management speaker? But I do believe there are a lot of things that we do well together, and that it's really important for us to learn both on the product side and the development side how we can build better products together. So I want to give you a little perspective of what I see out there in the community and what's happening right now in product management and where I think DevOps can help and how we can start working together with that. So as I mentioned, I wrote this book called Escaping the Build Trap back in 2018. And it was really about how to break through this cycle of just building feature after feature after feature, and instead focus more on outcomes. And since it came out, I've seen actually a lot of strides in product management and how we're doing it better. We're seeing a lot of teams out there focusing more on what actually produces outcomes. When I first started consulting and working with companies, even when I first started as a product manager over 15 years ago, we were not testing, right? I had to fight with people to just talk to a customer. I still have to fight with people to talk to customers sometimes, but it was such a weird concept back then. And now I think everybody knows, we should be talking to the customers. We should be testing. We should be focusing on outcomes. We should be looking at our goals. So I'm seeing a lot of really good work go into individual product management practices and trying to level that up. And that's a lot of what I do today, is teach those practices to both individual product managers and leaders. Yet, we still have some roadblocks into achieving what it means to be this concept of product-led, in what I'll get to in a minute. But what I'm hearing, I started this podcast, everybody has a podcast. I started this podcast about 2-3 years ago, and people can write in questions to me through this segment called Dear Melissa. And I keep getting these same questions over and over and over again. And the questions are, I subscribe to everything you are doing. How the hell do I get my company to work this way? All right, they just do not want to move. I just don't see a lot of action in actually doing this. So how do I do that? Which is really interesting to me, because these are coming from individual product managers, developers are writing in, UX people are writing in. But then on the other side, I work with a lot of executives. And the executives are telling me, I really want to be product-led. I am going through these transformations. I hired the product managers. I'm doing these things. But we're still not producing value, right? Why are we still not producing value? I think I'm trying to put these practices in place so that we become product-led, but it's not happening. So what's going on? So what's really happening that's blocking organizations? I see a lot of people want to do this, but when you try to get them to move, it's like herding cats, right? Nobody really wants to actually do the work to become product-led, and especially in different parts of the organization. So there's a lot of friction going on that's frustrating both leaders, product managers, developers, everywhere actually out there. And what I think is happening is that people are mistaking what product-led actually means. When they hear product-led, they think it's product management rules everything. We shall just dictate down everything that you should do, right? They think it's a function. They think it's the function that leads the organization. But that's not true. What product-led actually means is that the product leads our growth. We're choosing to grow through great products. We're choosing to grow and to scale by delivering great products that produce value to our customers. Sometimes that's packaged up with services. That's totally okay. But that's how we're scaling, right? That's how we're producing value. And we have to go back and actually connect that to the value. And to build a great product, there's actually a lot that goes into it. It's not just one person coming up with that concept and dictating it down. When you're actually looking at products and trying to figure out what we should be building, we need to take into account customer and user research. We need to look at market research and data. We need to look at the financial data on our company and the implications we have on sales, user data, and technology implications, of course, right? What are we doing and what can we do to utilize technology to scale and to grow? So all of this is a really big job to figure out how to create great products. What is stopping us? Inside organizations, what I see over and over again is that we're really good at working small, but we're really bad at thinking big. What's happening is that we're focusing on a lot of these practices that are very individual levels, but we're not looking at how the whole comes together, how everybody works together consistently to deliver great products. And that's embedded in our culture. So I really love this definition of culture. It's by Gert Hofstede, I hope I pronounced that correctly, but he says, while national cultures are based on deeply held values, organizational cultures are more concerned with practices. The repetition of those practices or behaviors within a workplace help to define the organization's culture, right? So think about it. When you go to work every day, what's being emphasized by leadership for what we should be practicing, right? What's being emphasized by people on your teams and around the organization that really shape your culture? When I look at product management, it's these individual pieces, right? It's like, hey, yeah, we know we should be defining personas. We know we should be story mapping. We know we should be usability testing. And we know we should be doing usage metrics. These are individual practices that are great for a product manager, but what's happening is we're not putting them together as a whole to lead the product towards being, lead the company to being product-led. It's not actually taking it a level up. We're keeping it into the teams. So what does that mean? I like to describe it like a kitchen, right? So imagine you go to a restaurant, or you're working in a restaurant, let's say, and you have a bunch of great chefs. You've got somebody who's a fantastic vegetable chef. They can julienne everything. They can make all the best vegetables. Then you got somebody else over here who's fantastic at fish, right? Like they're really good at the meats. They're really good at the fish. They can make a great dish when it comes to that entree. Then you got the sauce person. There's a name for that, I forgot. But you got the sauce person, and they're great at making sauce. They got the best Beaujolais or whatever you're going to do there. Now, if you put all that together, and let's say you take a sauce that goes for red meat and you put it with a fish, and then you take a bunch of vegetables that don't go with the fish and slam it all together, you're going to get this meal that actually tastes like crap. And that's what we're doing when it comes to product management, right? You can have the best individual components, but if there's no recipe, it all goes away, right? It all misses the point. So we really need to think about what are all those roles that we are playing in organizations? What are all these practices that we're doing? But how do they come together, right? How do they come strategically together to deliver the best experience? And what I see is that there's actually two components that are sorely missing in organizations and what people are concentrating on now. Those are product strategy and product operations, and that's what we're going to talk about more today. So product strategy is what do we need to build, right? What do we need to build? What do we actually need to get done? Why do we need to build it? And then product operations is how do we do that? How do we all work together to actually collectively do that? So product strategy, I like to start with because this is the number one thing missing in companies. It is so broken in almost every company out there. It is one of the worst things I see when I walk in. Product strategy is your recipes, right? It's what your meal is. It's actually the whole menu. Imagine you go for a tasting menu. What's the first course going to be? What's the second course going to be? How do they all go together? It's also the experience, right? When you come to your product, how do you actually experience? How do you go through it? That's what we're talking about with product strategy. But like I said, many organizations don't do this well. And that's why I think we're in the crisis that we're in right now. I checked on TechCrunch who's been tracking all these layoffs, we've had 282,000 layoffs in tech since January 2023. And I don't believe it's the only component of it, but I think a big component of it is product strategy. Organizations are doing way too much. And when money was free and we had 0 interest rates, they were doing it all. And I'd go into some of these organizations and we had like 18,000 product managers over the smallest little tiny components of the organization, but nobody actually figuring out how should those come together? How should they actually move the organization forward? There's a lack there. And we hired and hired and hired, trying to do everything instead of trying to figure out how to focus and do the right things. So when I go into most organizations, what I see is there's a company vision, and then there's just solutions, right? And that's it. And usually the company vision isn't great either. The company vision is like, make money. And everybody else is like, what? How? Right? Make money, I'll go. It's like, okay, do you want me to start a McDonald's chain? Like, how would you like me to make money? So what's happening here is that every single department has 18,000 business goals of their own. They all conflict with each other. And I also see a lot of executive teams that are just divided around this, right? Like marketing has goals that are completely different than the product goals, and technology has goals that are completely different than the sales goals, and none of it's actually coming together to work well together. So what happens is that instead of focusing, we get these lists of things that we actually need to hit with all of these big goals at the top. And that means that we have 40,000 different OKRs per team at the bottom, right? When we're actually working together. So what we do is we spread everybody thin across all of these initiatives, which is something that I call peanut buttering. And most organizations look like a mess when it comes to peanut buttering, right? Because you've got everybody working on these really big, lofty goals, and there's not enough focus and push to actually get it done. So that's why the executives aren't seeing the value that they want, right? That's why we're actually missing this. So how do we actually do strategy? There needs to be different layers that actually focus. And I actually think this is as much layers as you have. Like this is any size organization, this should be it. There should be no more. If you're a smaller organization, you're getting rid of that portfolio layer in the middle. So what's happening is we need to start at the top with what's the company vision, and what's the company's strategic intents, which is what I call them. And that should be collective, right? That should be collective across the executive team. And what we're doing there is having one defined strategy that goes across the company, focuses on what we want to achieve, and they're lofty and they're business focused. They're things like, how do we expand geographically, right? Do we want to do that as our number one priority? Should we be going up market? Is that our number one priority? So that everybody's not telling a different story. Once you have that, and it should be 3 to 5 years out, we're working on these time horizons here that are long-term, so we're not compressing strategy into the teams in very short term. Once we have that, then we go into the product strategy. And if you have multiple products, this is where a product portfolio strategy comes in. Many organizations do not have that. They have instead every product being run by a different leader, but no thought about how all those products come together to work together in good synergies, right? So if you have multiple products, we need a product portfolio strategy. How are we growing through our portfolio? What does that look like? Are we adopting a platform approach? How should they work together? Where can we leverage each other? How do we give guidance to each one of the individual products to go for that? And that's usually set by a chief product officer who's looking at the company goals and then trying to figure out what we do that with our products. That we're looking at 1 to 3 years in a time horizon, right? Still lofty, still something that we need to reach. Then we go into the individual products and we say, how do we grow that vision? What's that doing to help achieve that portfolio vision? And then we get into the teams. And the teams are coming up with the solutions. I call them options because I want them to experiment. I want them to figure out what we should be building, not necessarily just committing to the first solution they can look at, but exploring those options and figuring out, okay, how do we tackle these problems that were defined in the initiatives and what should we be shipping to customers? So when we operate this way, what we're doing is we're thinking long-term at the top, and then as we get into the teams, they're able to actually have enough space to look at quarterly and 6-month type solutions. And that doesn't mean that we're releasing once a quarter or anything like that. It has nothing to do with releasing. It's about what's our roadmap timelines? How far in advance should we really be focusing on? And this is how we work together up and down. But a lot of organizations don't do this. And the reason they don't do this, and the reason why we don't have connected product strategies back up to our business strategies, is because they're not really recognizing that in most organizations, our product is our business. So even if you work for a bank, product and software is so intertwined these days. There's not many companies out there that don't have a software component. And we can't just keep thinking of it as part of IT that sits over there, right? We don't want to be thought of as IT people anymore, right? We're part of actually delivering value for the business, whether that's on a revenue side or a cost side. Even if your software is streamlining internal operations, that is a huge business goal, right? That's a big way to achieve business value. So that's the shift in the mindset that a lot of organizations have to go through, is starting to really think about, how does product and business come together? Right? How do we make that tighter so that we integrate our software strategies back into our business strategies? And that starts on the top, really with getting all these executives aligned and making sure that they define one common goal of those strategic intents like I was talking about. It's not about having marketing, having lofty goals in a different direction than tech or than product or anybody else. Once we actually settle this, and this is the first thing that I actually do with a lot of companies that I work with, it's amazing how much the infighting stops. And that doesn't mean that you won't have your own strategies in tech or you won't have your own strategies in product, but we need to align on what we're all going after at the top first. And that's really important. So as we work our way down through strategy, we're really going through this process that I look at and call the product kata, which is based off Toyota kata. So when you set strategy, what we should be doing is first looking at the strategy above us. So if you're an executive, you're setting this for the first time. But if you're on a team, you're looking at, for example, your product initiatives. You're digesting it. You're trying to understand it. We're understanding the direction we want to go in. We're making sure that's clear. And in this spot too, we might go back and ask executives questions. We may ask leaders questions. Is this the goal? Is this what we're trying to do? Clarify it. Then we need to analyze the current state of where we are. And this happens at every band of the strategy. So where are we compared to that direction? Where are we actually going after? And to do that, we need a lot of data and analysis. People skip over this step so much. I see people walk into rooms and come up with roadmaps or strategies in an hour and come back and I'm like, you didn't look at any data. Like, you haven't talked to a customer, have you? Right? It's all coming out of their heads. So we need to actually spend a lot of time here. And when we first set strategy for the first time with a lot of companies I work with, we might be doing this for like 3 months, 4 months of really diving into customer research, market research, like trying to figure out what it is we want to go after, usage metrics, everything like that. Once we have that, now we can set the goal. Now we can set our part of the strategy. And then we would execute towards the goal on the team. If you are a leader, you're deploying that down. Right? You're deploying what your strategy is down to the team. Only the teams can execute. This is where we do our experiments, our MVPs, our building and testing, any work like that. Then there's a feedback loop where we actually check to see if we reach that vision, if we get to that direction we're trying to achieve with the current state, and we keep analyzing it and cycling it through. So when we do the product kata, the executives are doing this at their level with their strategic intents, the same exact process. The chief product officer and technology teams doing the same thing for their area, right? Directors of product are going to be doing the same cycle, and they're deploying this down and they're checking. And we have feedback loops that go all the way back up and make sure that we're going on the right path. And that's really what we should be looking at when we're deploying strategy. Now, the hardest part of doing this in any organization is this piece, the data and analysis. So many organizations lack an understanding of their current state because all the data and analysis is locked up somewhere and they're not getting access to it. And they're not able to figure out how do we actually go forward and set our strategy. So this is where the other piece comes in, which is product operations. So product operations is about unlocking teams. It's about how we all work together and get what we need and get the instructions we need or the information we need to be able to work together as a team, right? This is how we work together. This is a part of our operating model. So I recently just wrote this book on product operations, which we have a couple copies here too. But the purpose of product operations is to remove obstacles from evidence-based decision-making. So what it does is it enables the product management team, and it also helps the other teams as well, by proxy, figure out how to make better decisions. Deploy that strategy, set that strategy, and then monitor that strategy. And we do this by really surrounding the team with inputs that they need to be able to prioritize, to set that strategy, and then we streamline the ways of working to get it out. How do we do that? There's 3 different areas in product ops. So the first two actually are about really getting the inputs. One is on the business data and insights side. That's how do we get the information out of our systems into the hands of people who have to make strategy decisions. So we have a lot of information locked up internally that we need to analyze and look at and try to figure out where to go. The second part is streamlining customer and market insights. So this is about making it easier to contact customers. It's about getting the information that we already have on customers back to product managers. And it's about enabling them to go out and do better research. The last piece is on process and governance. And this is a touchy one, which we will talk about. But it's about scaling product management value and product management operating model. Right? So this is how do we work together and how do we work with other teams. It's not supposed to be dogmatic. It's supposed to just create some best practices so that we all know how to work together. What I love about product operations is that it works very well with DevOps. And I think we have a lot of the same principles here too. It helps promote customer centricity. We do want automation here. Just like you do on DevOps, we want to automate a lot of product ops. We're not trying to scale this through people. We're trying to scale it through systems and actually software. And also, it helps us build better products at the end of the day. So how do we actually do that? Let's break down a couple of these different pieces. So remember how I said it takes all of this to help figure out what the product is? Well, it also takes all of this different data to analyze to figure out how to build that product. So think about where those things live, right? Customer and user research. You've got UX teams out there, user researchers, you've got salespeople, you've got marketing people listening to customer support every single day. So many times that's locked up in Zendesk, it's locked up in Salesforce, it's locked up in all these places, and it never makes its way back to the product team. We have so much rich information in our systems. How do we get it out? How do we help people learn? Same with finance, same with data analysts, looking at the user data. Things are in amplitude, things are all over the place. Technology teams, you have a lot of great data too about how we can look at shipping our products, how we can understand deployments better. And then we've got compliance teams, legal teams. We have to work with all these people. So what we need to do is unlock the data we need from different systems. And there are organizations out there doing it really well. I love the way that Doodle does this. So I interviewed Stephanie Liu on a podcast. She's the chief product officer of Doodle. And they have a great data and insights team. And what they do is they have made it possible that every piece of data in their systems have been put into Popsicle or Power BI so that she can go and look up anything she needs. And the data team comes to the product team and they say, what types of analysis are you looking at? What types of dashboards do you need? Where are we going? And they make it possible to be a little more forward-thinking where they might approach them and say, hey, I noticed some differences in user trends, or I noticed some differences in people who are signing up recently. Maybe you want to look into this. But they also enable the entire product team to pull whatever they want. And they open up things like their finances too, so that you can connect it back to the financial implications. It's not inaccessible, right? They make it so anybody can pull the information out. And I think this is huge. This is absolutely huge to being able to set your strategy, both for executives and for product team members. So that's what we're talking about with a good business and data insights team, right? Making it possible for people to self-serve and do the analysis that they need to do to look at the OKRs and the goals and the metrics that are going to define that strategy. On the customer and market insights side, what we're doing here is trying to enable people to do good research. We're not actually doing the research for them. We are trying to enable it. But even complex companies like Fidelity have a great research ops team that is going out there and doing this. So Jen Cardello is somebody I worked with back when I was leading a transformation at Athena Health, and she implemented it there. So I got to see it firsthand, and it was amazing. And what she's done at Fidelity as well is huge. What they do is they have this small user research team, and they have a research ops team. And what they'll do is go out and figure out, how do we get people in touch with customers? So because they work in finance, they can't just let thousands of people out there to talk to customers every day. Lots of compliance going on. So they made it possible where they can certify people in different types of research to know that they will be compliant and go out and do different types of user research. They have a bunch of tools that are accessible to product managers so that they can go and do the surveys. They have a team that advises them on how to do it well. And they also have a system of, here's the people you can contact, so they make it easy to recruit and actually do those things. When we were at Athena Health, we had this database of users that her team would go out and say, hey, we do experiments, we do user research, we do surveys. Would you like to opt in as a user or as a customer to any of these things? How often would you like to be contacted? We had a problem where we had product managers going out and talking to the same hospital over and over and over and over again because they said yes, right? And we see this all the time. So we said, how do we make sure that we get the right information? So they created this database, which is possible for any product manager to go in, see the salespeople who are associated with them, check in on the account manager, say, is this person good? Are they touchy? Account team knew they couldn't just squash user research. This was allowed, this was endorsed by leadership. And then when they would contact them, they would take all the information they learned and put it in a repository so people could go back and actually understand what user research had already been done. It's another huge issue. People are out there doing user research in these companies with thousands of people, and then they're not digesting that user research or putting it somewhere other people can access. So that's really what this part is about. How do we get in touch with customers? How do we make it easy to do that? And then once people do get in touch with customers, even sales team, even marketing teams, right? What's the repository we could put it in so that anybody can understand user research, see the studies that have been done, and search it? And there's some great tools out there for these types of things now, which are really changing the game, right? And with the AI on top of it, you can go and search for insights. You can see what's been done. I'm just really excited about where this is going. So that's what that side really looks like. It's also about making sure that information's getting across companies. So Pendo started product operations with Christine. Christine's first task was going to sales, and sales and product were not getting along, surprise, surprise. And going to sales, figuring out how we get the sales requests to product, making it not just so that it was like, go build these features, but how do we actually get something that's repeatable from sales, get the information to product, making it possible for product to digest that information and then go back to sales with roadmaps. So she first started streamlining that communication and then started automating ways that they would work together. And it bridged this gap between sales and product so that sales knew what was coming up in a roadmap that was okay, that was on a good cadence. It wasn't super specific with problems. It wasn't just features being put on it, but also all the information we were hearing about win-loss analysis, who we were winning with, who we weren't, was getting back to product. So that's where they started, which was a huge help. Other places start in different areas, but to me, starting with your big problems in your organization is really the first key to success with product operations. Another good example of what we did at Athena Health as well was we created ways for us to actually help sales not oversell the roadmap, right? So I'm sure nobody here has had that problem ever. We had a big problem with that. So what we did was we created things like guidelines for how roadmaps were going to go out and what it meant to be an experiment stage versus in generally available. Anybody could buy it. So we created this framework, which was lightweight, took us like a week to do, less, and we rolled it out. And we labeled everything on our roadmap, and we said, if it's in discovery mode, we labeled it discovery mode, experiment mode, or alpha mode, you're not allowed to sell it. Do not tell them it's coming. If it's in alpha mode, we're going to solve that problem. We validated it's a good problem to solve. We just don't know how we're going to solve it yet. So we're testing. We're still testing here. But do not promise it by a date. If it's in beta mode, actually, that solution is going to come out. And we probably know it's going to come out in the next quarter or two. Don't promise them a date, but tell them it's coming. Tell them it's coming by the end of the quarter or by the end of the year. We've finagled with the sales team what that meant. If it's in GA, generally available, it means it's out there. Sell it to anybody. This solved all of our problems when it came to sales. And it really helped us all start speaking the same language, so that when a product person said, hey, we're experimenting, or a team said, hey, we're experimenting, nobody thought, oh, that's going to come out this year, right? Or in this quarter or this month. It helped bridge those communications. And this is a piece of product operations too, creating these guidelines and these frameworks that help with communications. So that's a part of what we're talking about when we talk about process and governance, is how do we get ways of working throughout the organization? It also helps with, once you create the strategy, how do you monitor it? So Oscar Health is a company in the United States that does healthcare, and they have this cadence that they put together for actually reviewing strategy. We had a similar one at Athena Health too. And what they did with their product ops team is they defined those different areas of strategy layers, like we were showing, and they made it possible to review certain things with different people on different cadences. So they said, we're going to review the annual planning stuff is going to happen here. Here's who's invited to these meetings. Here's who's invited to these other meetings. This is how we review roadmaps. And they put this cadence in so that everybody knew when they were going to be involved. Cross-functional stakeholders would be involved at certain times. All of this would come together, and there would be no, hey, can I get that roadmap? Like, I need to sell this to a customer. Or when are you going to ask me over here in marketing about what's coming up? Or how do I actually get product marketing involved before a release? All of this came together to be well-defined so that everybody knew how they contributed to the product, and everybody knew where they were coming in for annual planning. So those are just a couple examples of how product operations helps in organizations. But as you know, we're not the only ops team. So what we suggest and what we write about in the book is that how do we all work together to help leverage what each other have to make better operations throughout our organization. And again, I don't think this needs to be a huge team. I'm not talking about having 1 million people in product operations. Well, I think what we can do is go out and learn from other operations teams like DevOps, like sales ops, like design ops, and figure out how do we all work together to make better products, right? That's the goal. That's what we're all in this for. So what do we do to actually make it all go together? Now, there's a lot of companies actually doing product operations. Stripe does product operations, Calendly does product operations, PayPal, Shopify, a lot of these companies that you've heard out there. It's a new emerging role, but it's an important role. And it's something that leaders really need in order to help streamline and scale these things, just like DevOps is for technology. So when we put this all together, what we get at the end of the day is better communication and collaboration across teams. It should make it transparent too, as developers, to be able to see what product management does and how product management is helping to contribute value. It shows you where you plug into their process. It tells us how we all work together. And it also helps share information with everybody in the organization. It creates better strategies and business outcomes. We get the data we need to set the strategy, and then we can monitor the strategy. It also helps with better product launches. It makes sure that people like product marketing are plugged in. It makes sure that we're in sync with development and releases. And it's also better for the onboarding of product managers. So what we do is we have a defined set of practices in our organization about how we work. And I'm not saying this is super prescribed to anything out there like an agile or a safe thing or anything like that. It's what works for us with product management. So when you onboard people, they know how they fit in and they know how the company operates. They know what our way of working is. So that's really why I think these things are incredibly important, right? We are trying to get to outcomes. That's what it means to be product-led, right? Better outcomes for our customers growing through releasing great products. But again, we have to stop and ask ourselves, what are our practices and behaviors in an organization to actually get there? So I'd really encourage you to think about, on your side or with your product managers, what are we talking about on a day-to-day basis? What is the behavior of our leadership when it comes to thinking big? Are we thinking big or are we talking small, right? Are we only talking about individual practices, or are we actually talking about what we want to achieve and how we all come together to do that? Because if we only focus on the small, we're going to end up with a bunch of meals that nobody really, really wants to eat. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.